Hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here. It is Basketball Rewind. I'm here. I'm joined by Beyond, and it is Draft Talk again. Guess what? We are here. We're going to be talking about a couple different things, and as we kind of go through the different guards and whatever, obviously the standings are kind of shifting and meandering their way through on both ends, both on the tankathon, both from a draft standpoint as we get into March Madness. Stay tuned for that, of course, and because we are in March. It is the month. And that's only the beginning. And I also think as we slowly figure out from a standings-wise place from the NBA, where are all the different teams, including the Raptors, going to end up? Can they move up? Will they stay the same, et cetera, et cetera? So with that being said, Beyond, how are you doing? It's been an interesting week, but we're going to keep it draft talk for this one. I should also say we are going to be covering LaBaron Philon, I think, or Philon Jr. But yeah, LaBaron is who we're going to talk about. Your thoughts?
Hey man, it's Selection Sunday, so like today's a good day to be discussing draft talk. So, yeah, it's like so I'm excited to to kind of get it going. Yeah, man, no problem. I'm doing well, by the way. Yeah, I'm doing good.
Perfect. So yeah, I mean, we get into LaBaron Jr., of course, and here's the first thing that I noticed about him. He was a 4-star recruit. He plays out of Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes you have, University of Texas versus Texas University versus Texas Tech versus Tex. So point is, as far as I know, he plays for Alabama. He plays for one of the red teams. I believe he's in the SEC, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, because just in terms of the overall history and that sort of thing, you're better at me than that. I'm just here for the scout. But last year, this is the interesting thing. He's a sophomore. He entered the combine last year and made the decision that he's going to kind of say, you know what, I'm going to move on up, gain some more skills, and enter the draft in the following year. And here we are. So last year he measured in at 6'2" 3/4. I think I'm going to be generous for this and say that he is closer to 6'3", 6'4", but I am being generous. Yeah.
It's been kind of between, depending on who you read, like one or the other.
Yeah, I'm. As I wrote here, I said it depends on the shoes and the posture.
Pretty much.
He's a plus size wingspan, 6'6". And I think it's a respectable profile for his type of guard, if you will. But it's not one that immediately jumps off the page. He's a little bit below my minimum requirements of what I like, but there is something there that is very interesting. He's going to be 20 years old when entering the potential season early on, and then obviously he turns in, I think, late November. I think it's the 24th is his birthday. So. So yeah, I think the other thing that I'm noticing about him right off the bat, just diving into his offense, is, to me, I think he has a certain level of craft and feel that will kind of buy him more time to figure out the athleticism changes between the NBA versus NCAA, because I think, again, last time he measured in, he was a $175. Mm-hmm. And his body has grown, but you say he's a $185. He needs to get closer to the 190, 95 range if he can, I think, to really handle the physicality. And we're going to talk about this as a long-standing point that I'm going to be making throughout this, of course. So, as I dive into his offensive profile, I think, again, he plays with a certain level of pace, but he can't play it. He's not like a Jaden Ivey, where he's just Speedy Gonzalez, but he can. His craft is good enough that he can manipulate his pace. And here's where I think that comes into play. When he is attacking the hoop, he's not the best at finishing around the hoop. He's not the worst either. He's about average, maybe a little bit above average. I think it's around the 50s, mid-50s. But he likes to use deceleration. This is something that is a skill. This is something that like a Luka Doncic is really good at. So he'll kind of be going at a good pace, and then he just has the core strength to kind of slow it down. And then he also can kind of go into up and under moves. This is why There's a little bit of almost like pseudo, not quite at this level, but pseudo Rondo in his game. He has a little bit of these like Euro steps, different arrays of movement, lateral shifts. He also has a bit of herky-jerkiness in him too, and that all comes from the core strength. So his core strength is good. That I will give him. I know that they don't always look at that from an athleticism standpoint, but yeah. Your thoughts so far?
I like him a lot. I mean, I think one thing that's very similar to the guard we discussed last time, Christian Anderson and him, is they both have a real knack for finding players. Like they have a natural instinct for passing, which is in this day and age is almost it's not something to be taken for granted. So that is a fantastic skill set to have. You mentioned this case, the right word is crafty. There's a lot of different comps I've heard, from everything from, not saying he's going to be this, but the style of play, let's put it that way, from like Darius Garland I've heard to like, to some Gordon Dragic, and I could get that prime Dragic. I can get this. I can see where they're coming from to some extent.
Yeah,
like laying cause havoc a little bit in that sense.
Yeah, like Suns Dragic.
Yeah, exactly. Suns Dragic, exactly right. So I think sometimes people think of the bad taste in this case in this market, but Dragic, Dragic,
or even like late stage Dragic on the Heat, which was a different Dragic.
We got moved the Heat, yeah, exactly. But definitely Suns Dragic, yeah, like. So when you look at that and look at the comps I've seen for him, I think Rondo's a really good one. But I think what he has probably on all those guys, with the exception of Garland, that he actually is a pretty good shooter from three. Like so like he could keep you honest.
He wasn't always, by the way.
No.
So he has improved in that area.
Yeah, he has improved, and I think that was where my next point was, is that watching him last year, you kind of was just lost in the shuffle a little bit. I remember watching him last year when everyone was focused on watching the Rutgers guys. People forget Bam was ranked at number 1 at one point last year, and we watched that game when they're playing in Vegas in the tournament against Rutgers. Obviously, we're looking at Harper, we're looking at Bailey, but he was on the other side, and of course, Sears was on the other side, who was putting up points like no one's business. I think Sears had a huge game that game, and now it's Sears moving on and Youngblood moving on. Now they have him, and of course, a good Canadian boy. Holloway now is in the backcourt with him. He decided to move from the Hatfields to the McCoys, but from going to Auburn, Alabama. I don't know what life is down there for him, but hey, just watch yourself, young man. Like that was a big move. He didn't even decide I'm going to go to Kentucky maybe or Florida. No, he's out going to go down the street, to the blood rival in this case here. And it's like, whoa. So he's having a pretty nice little season himself, but he's really. I think what he's done is with more attempts now, where he's almost about where he's pushing up his attempts, and you think he's like double the attempts, but he's actually kept the efficiency up and improved on the efficiency, which is very difficult to do at times. So especially when you're a focal point. So I a lot to like.
So far at an NCAA level, he is a 3-level scorer. I think he will have to build up that strength to really get there in an NBA. But just because, when you compare him to Christian Anderson has the speed to get there, and I think he's a much more elite vertical popper. Although some people say Christian Anderson is not elite. I would say if Christian Anderson's in the 85th percentile, this kid's closer to maybe the 65th percentile.
Agreed. I think athletically, that's where the separation happens between Philon and Anderson, where you see that. Yeah. Where Anderson seems, even though they're about the same height, essentially. Yeah. Anderson plays bigger, if that makes sense.
That's exactly where I was going, because going back to where I was talking about the herky-jerky kind of rhythm, if you will, one of the things is that he has this tendency to do snapbacks, hesitation moves, again, the decels, and the pullbacks. And the thing is that having all of those micro adjustments that he can put all into one complete package without the elite burst, I think gives him something. Again, it's more than just a morsel to chew on. That's how he is shot. 50, I think it's 51% ish, or technically it's probably 50. It's actually closer to 50.2 or 50. Say it's 51%. I don't have him in front of me, or 50.7% as of today. 40% from deep, and I believe just around 78.7 or 70. 9% from the free throw line. He gets to the line a lot, and I think you'll see it again. Not trying to always pitting him against another guard, but versus Christian Anderson, where he gets to the rim and he can slap the backboard. He's kind of doing it in ways where he can sometimes be over reliant on a floater, but it when you compare him to a guy like Ben Sturtz, who we talked about, I think there's a lot more there, even at a slightly smaller frame. There's a lot more there that you can kind of look towards and say, maybe there's something there at an NBA level. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I think he splits the difference between the two other point guards we've discussed.
Yeah.
Where he's not as explosive perhaps as Anderson is, where you can say, okay, it's like, wow. But at the same time, he's not Sturtz, where I think he's pretty much molded for a certain type of role. I think he's a guy that can grow. I think he has the ability to be an all-star at times. Is he a guy in this case here where he's going to be a Hall of Fame type level player? No. Could I see him being a 3 or 4-time all-star in his career? Yeah. Which is really Darius Garland. Darius Garland's been on 2 or 3 all-stars already, right? Like, it's like, so I can see him being that type of player where it's like.
And Garland's a smaller guard too, by the way.
And he's a smaller guard, exactly. So like, I'm just saying, like, that level of player, like, that's nothing to slouch about. I think there's guys ahead of him that you could build the franchise around that we'll get into later on. But he's a guy that if he's like your third best player, that's not necessarily a bad thing, I think, or he set the table for you. Or third or fourth best player, that's fine. I think he can be that on a very good team.
Yeah, and I mean, he's been playing basketball since the age of 7, so there's definitely, there's a lot there, that he's been involved with in terms of being around the game.
Yeah, exactly. I think he'd go up to being their second best player if he's going to talk about all-star consideration. I think he can be that too. So make sure I'm not trying to contradict myself. I'm just saying his upper level is he can be the second best player on a really good team, and he can make some all-star games for him. Yeah,
so I think you're actually higher on him than I am, funny enough. I do think that he can initiate the offense for sure. But right now I see him more as like a really, really, really high end on we're talking about championship team type stuff, like a 6-man that can kind of run an offense and stuff like that. Now on this team, I think he's an instant upgrade over what you have on the bench. Like it's like goodbye. I almost said Fred Shed, without question. It just, I like my main thing is again, like offensively, it's both a good and a bad thing, right? Like, it's like he has a very floor-oriented game, and for that reason, when I look at it and then I compare him to other guys, it's like, okay, so he has the counter. So a lot of guys, you want to build the counters, you don't want to build all these things up over time, and so that they can lengthen their game. So that's why I say there's a chance that he can kind of get in there and figure it out, but these are counters for a reason, right? Like it's a counter. It's like Scotty with the with the fadeaway jumper. It's a good thing. You don't want to over rely on the counters. So we'll see what happens, of course. So and he can operate. He likes high-low passes. I do think that there are others that are better at short roll, quick hits, in terms of playmaking. But your thoughts beyond that in terms of going to the shooting and then.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think right now he's, he could potentially translate to a 3-level scorer in the NBA. I think, I agree with the athleticism, but there's other guys that haven't been the most athletic guys that have been very good in the NBA as point guards and been impactful. Some are Hall of Fame guys. I'm not saying he's going to be Chris Paul, but Chris Paul's no wonder in this case athletically. But Chris Paul found a way through his own craft and guile and skill set to become a very dominant point guard in this league. Could I see him being that? Not necessarily at Chris Paul level. I wouldn't say that is like one of the best 5-point guards ever played. No, I wouldn't say that. But could he be a level down where it's like, as I said before, that next level type of guy? Some teams, I can see that. Especially on this team and the Raptors, the skill set he offers is something that this team dearly lacks. Like, they need a player of that type of caliber to understand how to read a game, how someone can actually draw fouls, could get his own shot, could knock down shots from 3. Like, he does all the gaps that they are missing right now. Every single one he inserts here. You want someone that's to up your free throw attempts in this case and get in the lane? Check. You want someone that can hit from 3 pretty well? Check. You want someone that can run your offense and set the table? Check. You want someone that's a pretty good passer in this case here? Check. Like he does all those things. I mean, we'll get to him defensively, but I think that he's not too shabby there too. So like, I think, yeah, I guess I mean, I think if he was in another draft, that's the ironic part. In some ways, if he had the skill set he had now in last year's draft, he might be a top 10 consideration.
Yeah. I mean that is true, because once you got out of the top 4 for last year's draft, it's funny they're calling this draft so far a double draft, which is very interesting. But yeah, like in terms of the polish and all that, like yeah, there's a world where he would be up there with the Trey Johnsons and whatnot. I do think he's interesting from the standpoint that he's good on ball, but his off ball shooting is going to be the swing skill for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, I think that's always something with guards when they come out of college because they're so used to having the ball in their hands so much in college, especially just the way how college is, where the coaches are such micromanagers. They don't want anyone else touching the ball but the point guard. So you have rare experimentation, which would make Cooper Flag actually interesting last year. Him and a few of the other guys, because be him or Bailey or anything, they were actually able to have the ball in their hands to do stuff where it's like, oh, this is what might look like in the NBA. Which is rare in college because everything
for sure. I mean, you talk about him managing basically a possession. He's more of like the control, probing in with a little bit of patience. Even his passing, like he's a smart passer. He's not the most progressive reading passer, but he will take care of the ball. But he also doesn't hold on to the ball and probe too much, where you're like, okay, keep the ball moving, right? Like it's like he has natural inclinations of a point guard, and that's one of the things, or closer to being a point guard, even for those who say he's more of a combo guard or whatever. He has more natural inclinations of that. So yeah, I mean, he has, what you'll see right now is that he's patient enough to wait for the double teams, and then he goes and hits the correct pass. But he's not necessarily I'm thinking 3 moves ahead. So like again, I compare it always to like Kyle Lowry versus a Chris Paul. He's more of a Chris Paul than a Kyle Lowry in terms of the way that they would probably think the game.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I think that also speaks to the Chris Paul element of it versus, let's say, a Kyle Lowry. Is that Chris Paul is less willing to make the mistake by making a certain pass, while obviously Kyle Lowry would take a little bit more risk at that point. And if we're just to go back to our confidence now, like I think Anderson is the most riskier of the 3 guards we've dealt with so far. He's willing to take that risk and see things in a different way or a little ahead of schedule, which is not for everybody. Everyone doesn't have that ability. So like, I'm not taking a knock on the young man here, but I think he's more than capable of like running the offense and still helping you move the ball well in the half court. So
yeah, and he has a 4.5 assist to 2.5 turnover ratio, and I think that's like emblematic of everything that we've talked about so far. Again, I don't think that it's a bad thing for someone to control the ball really well. I mean, he has at one point he had his assist percentage from an advanced analytics standpoint was in the mid 30s. I think it's dipped down to about like just above 30, but it's up there. But I think, how do I put it? Like, there are times when you want someone to be more conservative. So it sounds like I'm being negative on him, but I'm really not. It's a stylistic thing. You can make it work with both situations.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like there's times when you want someone to kind of be a little bit more reserved and not be a swashbuckler. And in fact, in some ways, on the Raptors, we've had swashbucklers and we've had reserved point guards who have not necessarily had, in recent memory, had like the true point guard thoughts. So like Flynn is a good example where like you thought he would be something else, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this guy's shooting way too much. I don't think that LaBaron would have problems like not moving the rock.
Agreed.
So yeah. So I guess I have a couple questions. Do you think he's better as a secondary? Before we get into the defense, of course, do you think he's more of a tweener? Do you think he's more of a secondary creator that benefits from a first level primary initiator? Or Yeah, what are your thoughts?
I think you see. I actually, you saw him more as a six man, but I can see him as a starter. So I am a little more bullish on him than you. And I think I could see him as I guess, in theory, the point guard on a team. But could I see him in this case playing a secondary role for a guy? Say you have a big wing distributor, and you could play off of him. They say you're playing with a guy like Siakam or Cooper Flag. Yeah, could he play in that role? Yeah, definitely he could play in that role, kind of playing off ball. I think over time, yeah. Or he could get you some offense as a secondary dude. Yeah, you know, in some ways,
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's this dude. I'm not saying this, guys. I'm just thinking about the standpoint of the position he might be in, where where I'm not saying from an offense standpoint, there's no one quite like Kyrie in this sense. But Kyrie, in the sense of from the standpoint of role that Kyrie's played and where he's better at, Kyrie's always been better as the second banana. That's just a fact. Right now, we don't know what this kid will be because I don't think he has the same thirst for scoring that Kyrie has.
No.
So there's very few have the thirst of scoring like Kyrie. So they put that in quotations. But I think he would have a better time of. I think he has a better sense of like figuring out where he fit in on a team than some guys that in the past have struggled in that role.
I mean, I feel bad. I actually forgot to say that, like, yes, so he's scoring 22 points, and like five assists and 3 rebounds. I said how much he goes to the line, which is like around 5 times a night. But like, yeah, I didn't say the points. So like, it's like he could put up real points, folks. On like, again, we talked about the efficiency earlier. It's like 50-40. You don't even need to know about the other. Just 50-40, and his 3-point volume. I just have it right here. He's actually almost doubled his 3-point volume. He went from 3.4, shooting like in the 30s last year, like 31%. Now he's shooting on like 6 a game, 40, and the release is like real quick. It's nice. So there's a lot to like about his game, like going back to those type of things.
And to your point, our friends at No Ceilings made a quick little post about him, earlier mid-February at the time. In non-conference play, he was getting to the line almost 6 times a game. But when he got into SEC competition, which is likely better competition than the non-tournament, the non-conference stuff, he upped it to 7 attempts a game at the 7 free throw attempts a game. So like, at that point, he was up to 7. I'm not sure if he tailed off or not, but like.
Well, I know he played Georgia recently, and he got to the line 7 times there. Right before that, he played Tennessee 5 times. He played Louisiana State 4 times. So I mean, and even Auburn, he went 4 times. And it's just really efficient overall. I think his worst game was actually against it looks like Louisiana State. He kind of tailed off that game, but then came back and had 4 straight over 20 20-point games on like above 50%. One of them was like 65% almost shooting.
You can see Kenya's all about the scouting, man. Kenya don't deal with college basketball for the scouting, man. You referred to as Louisiana State. I heard no one called him that. I think someone called you by your full. It's like you go by your full name.
Oh, LSU. Doy. Oh, of course. I know who LSU is. Yeah. Sorry, folks. Of course.
I like when you get called out by your whole formal name, like, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
LSU was like that.
LSU has had some weird players, though. You know what I mean? Like it's like Ben Simmons.
LSU, LSU is one of those
programs. They have a better women's team.
Yeah, they're a weird type of recruiting, and it's the same for football and basketball, where they'll be in these lows for a couple of years. My dad likes them in this case here. Actually, there's a friend in the family that has their son that was playing for them for a bit, I think, for like a backup quarterback, I think. But anyhow, the thing is, they'll be quiet for a couple of years, and then they'll get some crazy player out of the blue, and that would be like an all-timer. For example, out of the blue, they get Justin Jefferson, who might be the best receiver in the league, and on the same team with Joe Burrow. Like, oh. And then a few years back, like Odell Beckham out of the blue. Like, okay, same thing with basketball. We'll have Shaquille O'Neal and the formerly known as Chris Jackson, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, and they'll be quiet for a while, and we'll have nothing for a minute. And they said before Ben Simmons comes out of nowhere, it's like LSU is notorious for that. Pistol Pete out of the blue. Okay,
yes, and Shaq and stuff. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. I think before we get into the defense of it all, I'll just say this. In some ways, I like the fact that I don't sully myself too much with like overlooking and just focusing on NCAA basketball to the point where I know, because it's like I'm coming at it from a particular lens and mindset. Exactly. So so it's kind of in some ways an unbiased lens where I'm like, I'm not focused on, okay, this is a tough conference. I'll talk to you about it and be like, okay, like, is this a tougher conference, or Tyler from No Ceilings and stuff like that. But like, I just watch like an individual game,
Right.
or a couple of them, and I'm like, okay, like what's going on within the course of the game. And then of course the tournament is the tournament. That's just different because then you know that the lights are bright and whatnot. But
Exactly.
Defensively is very interesting. I think last year he was a much better defender. This year, I think he's shown flashes of it. Now, I do think that there are reasons for that. I think he has shown some flashes of being a decent disruptive point of attack guy. He definitely is good at chasing guys off the line, and he has just enough speed to kind of remain close and keep attached to the offender, kind of going down. And then I've seen him do that, and then literally in the same possession, kind of turn around and still like defend against another, someone who got ran off the line and like drove or was passed to off of that, and was able to successfully contest. So the length for him helps him to overcome his being of a slightly lower stature. So his ability to recover is good. The ability to flip the hips, like I said before, absorb contact and all that is good. He's going to struggle a little bit with switchability though. But I think that's not always the most needed thing for every single team. Like, say you had the Raptors. Say let's go into the Raptors next year, and probably going to be turnover on the roster, but let's assume that you're going to have Scotty Barnes, CMB, and Brandon Ingram. Okay? Brandon Ingram has improved to the point where it's like he's not like completely a liability. He's not the best, but yeah. Between CMB and Scotty Barnes, that's enough switchability, in my opinion. With the right center and stuff like that, that I'm not like, oh my gosh, I need like another two guys that can switch like 1 through 5. I think we'll be okay. Okay? My concern with him is screen navigation because of the weight mainly. However, I will say this about him. I think that the fact I'll use the almost the inverse of the Scotty Barnes excuse. Okay, the fact that he had to take so much of a role offensively compared to the year before has probably diminished his willingness, because he shows, I think he has, it's not, I don't think it's a motor issue. It's more of like a consistency issue. Beyond the screen navigation. And I think that there's like getting used to that energy at an NBA level is going to be interesting for him. Your thoughts?
I think it's one of these situations now that he's taking on a heavier load of scoring. I think he's picking his spots, really.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I guess my biggest concern with him, I'm not really concerned about that. I agree with you. I'm not concerned about, if it's a motor thing in the NBA.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. I think my issue with him would be just the size factor. So going back, from one thing screens, the other possibility is when you get caught in switches and mismatches. Can you fight the position to kind of just hold up for that extra second to give time for help, or at least to force a guy into a much more difficult shot? The body right now is not quite where you want it to be for that at the moment. Like, I think he needs a little, you need to be a little more in the weight room over the off season. Curious to see what it looks like on draft day. But that's my biggest issue with him when it comes defensively. I don't think it harms as much offensively because he's not the most, he's athletic, but he's not athletic some other guys that we will talk about later on. But he's not like an aerial assault. In this case, he doesn't have like an aerial assault type of game where it's like, okay, like John Morant, where it's like, oh Lord, is this good? With that frame, he can survive in 4 years' time? Like, no. So that's not a concern for my point on the offense. And on the defensive end, though, he could get punished for that little bit. You got to eat some more Wheaties there, man. You got to fill it out a little bit, man.
Now, he has been compared in the past to one player. I saw this, and I'm wondering your thoughts on this. Andrew Nembhard. Now, obviously, he has the plus wingspan, which Andrew Nembhard does not. But Andrew Nembhard is actually still a good defender. I remember that was a thing. But yeah. But your thoughts?
Well, Nembhard's body's got a better build overall in my mind. Like,
agree.
That's the thing. Yeah. So
he's like 6'5".
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Yeah, Demhar's just a little bit of a thicker, more physical player in that sense that I don't think you could like. I don't see it. And another thing, offensively, I think this kid's got more oomph to his game offensively than Demhard does.
Yes, and I think that he's a better, more natural passer.
Yeah,
Like Nemhar's closer to being a combo guard than this kid.
yeah, exactly. In some ways, it's the opposite. Like if you had to tell me a guard's kind of the opposite of him in some ways.
Yeah, Nemhard has the athleticism, whereas he relies on
Yeah. It's like no, it's like that's not who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's why the Rondo thing is very interesting because it's like almost like Rondo with the jump shot kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You know, obviously Rondo's Rondo, so I'm not saying he is Rondo, folks, but you know, and I think actually, funny enough, Rondo was a much more progressive, dangerous passer. I don't think he has that in him, but it's almost like a Rondo mixed with, like as you said, like a Darius Garland and you know, like maybe a CP3 a little bit, just so people kind of get the overall idea of it. You know, don't focus too much on the direct comparisons, but yeah.
I think all three of those guys, what we're talking about, to kind of wrap up in this one phrase, it's craft or guile. That's what those three guys have in common.
Poise, waiting. Because that's the thing, like Rondo, because Rondo had that up and under move, it's because he was able to read the defender right in front of him really well. It's like, wait, stop, right? And go up in that way. And that takes a certain amount. It's a different type of athleticism.
And I think the Rondo part, even though the jump shot is obviously not saying obviously he's a better shooter than Rondo from that perspective, but where I could see him very, very similar to Rondo in the NBA perspective is that Rondo was a lights on guy, right? You know, we talked about this for other players in this case, but Rondo was a lights on guy. I remember Bill Simmons mentioned this, like, yeah, he's right. You get a Sunday afternoon and he's got to play the Lakers. Rondo may put 35 on you that night. Okay, he's one of them dudes. He'll distribute for everybody else if he's playing Sacramento on Wednesday night. But boy, let it be Sunday and let it be on NBC.
So he's Hornets going 0 points.
Exactly. Yeah. Gotcha. He'll just kind of distribute. Here, Garnett get his. You just chill, get the 8 points. You know, maybe 12 assists and call it a day. But those days, if you play the Heat or you play the Lakers or one of those rivals, it's a Rondo night, boy. If you're a betting man, start moving those money.
Yeah, I don't think that this kid's like, shies away from. He's not. He doesn't seem like a bright light player. But either way, I think what we've seen so far, and we haven't even. We're probably not gonna, at least from a Raptor standpoint, not really gonna focus too much on like the Petersons and the Cuffs and all that kind of stuff. Even though I would love to, is like these guys. It's like. I'm not saying that I'm not high on them. What I'm saying is, like, if this is the starting point, then the ceiling really is the roof.
I've never understood that.
I've never understood it either, but yeah. Like where it might be above the roof, hopefully. But we're on the roof, folks. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, if you can really get into this draft or whatever, like, I think that there are some guys. I of the two, if I were to guess who is going to be more likely to be there, of LaBaron and Christian Anderson, I would say LaBaron is more likely to be there. Funny.
Agree. I think so too.
Yeah. Okay, I think that about covers it. Any final words on this man?
No, man. And once again, man, you're right. It's just the four guys we've done so far. It's looking like it's gonna be one heck of a draft, boy. Like, it's hard pressed for you to leave this draft if you're in a half decent position. Well, anything. Like, honestly, I think if you're 2021 in, you're gonna get yourself a very good player.
Yes, yeah. Like, honestly, I really do think. I'm not saying that every single person is gonna be like amazing, but I think that this is one of those drafts where it's almost like the Shea draft, or even where it's like, okay, you can pick a guy like 15 through or 13 through 19. Sorry?
The 98 one with Kobe and Nash and
yes,
and Iverson, all of them. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, where it's like you can get some guys in the middle of the draft where it's like, okay, this guy, you're gonna be shocked. That's not to diss the first part of the draft, but I think that there's some guys that are going to end up in really nice situations. And there's also some picks like I'm looking right now, and OKC's pick might be available depending on who it is. Like, the Spurs pick may be available. There are some picks that might be available here. So don't be shocked, folks.
Well,
You know,
FYI, ESPN has them right now at this moment going to us. Has this young man going to us?
really.
The Raptors, yes.
Okay,
That's the reason
interesting.
why I said, hey, I said let's do it because like right now he's right in the crosshairs.
Yes, 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 yes. All right. Well, I think that is a pod, folks. Thanks. Like, comment, and subscribe, and give your thoughts below on the young man. Take care. Peace.